Hello and welcome to episode number 2 of the Faith and Reason Show with Father James Altman, with Jack Maxey, and with Elizabeth Yore. I'm John Henry Weston. We're going to be talking today about Russia and Ukraine, all the craziness going on there.
John Henry, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
Father.
I never would dream of interrupting you, but it seems like a really good idea whenever we do this to maybe begin with the prayer.
By all means, please, Father, why don't you go ahead?
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. We ask you, Lord, to lead us today and every time we do this to be a reflection of your divine love. Fill us with the grace we need to be witnesses of that love unto martyrdom. We ask this grace in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, John Henry. It just seemed like really a good thing to do.
Absolutely, Father. Thank you. We are going to be discussing Russia and Ukraine and all of what might come from there. Jack Maxey, who is really into the geopolitical scene, will be leading us in that discussion. We also are going to be taking up what happens with Canada, the tip of the spear, in terms of what seems to be the implementation of the Great Reset. And then we're going to take on the Great Reset. So stay tuned for Faith and Reason. Jack Maxey, can you lead us off in just a discussion of what's going on in Russia, Ukraine right now? We just saw this morning the head of the Greek Catholic Church coming on strong with begging for not only prayers, but saying how unjust the situation is. But it's super confusing because there's Russia, there's Ukraine. Russia seems to be one of the places on earth that seems to be speaking truth on moral issues, while the West is completely insane, and yet there's all this stuff happening. What's going on there, and how do you make sense of it?
I've been saying for over a week now that we were going to do nothing, that this was going to end up becoming our sort of peace in our time. I mean, how obtuse do our leadership have to be to set up a Munich conference to resolve this? Because it's very clear that we are not going to do anything to keep those breakaway portions of Ukraine as a part of Ukraine. My guess from the start is that we're going to have a negotiated peace in which these two countries get independence. This sounds to be what Vladimir Putin said yesterday afternoon. There was a very interesting piece where he was discussing it at a Security Council. Ironically, the Russians have open Security Council meetings for this, which I thought was kind of interesting. Sounds like they're going to recognize their independence, and then I think they're going to get Crimea outright. I think that's the end game. I think the U.S. taxpayers, the European Union taxpayers are going to pay the freight. I always say, judge what people do, not what they say they're going to do, because clearly we've backed down from the very beginning. Today, the White House announced that they're going to impose sanctions on all of the officers and directors of Gazprom because of Nord Stream 2 as a part of a package of sanctions. But they also, right after they said it, because people began asking, and it was my immediate question, what about Gerhard Schroeder, the former premier of Germany, who has been on the board of directors of Gazprom since 2005, when he abruptly left the race for chancellor and left it all to Angela Merkel. Now, all of this is tied in. You have to remember, as we stand right now, 35% of all the gas of Western Europe comes from the former Soviet Union or from Russia proper. They cannot afford under any circumstances to get in a conflict to shut off the gas. Now, Putin has an interest here as well, because remember, with all these sanctions, they're still buying 35-40% of their gas with US dollars that goes right into Putin's pocket. So without being too harsh, I really think a lot of this is kabuki theater. I think that it was very clear from the start when the Bidens started clamoring that war is on the horizon, war is on the horizon. They showed us what looked like an 18th century cannonball round through, of course, an elementary school. The Germans immediately told the Lithuanians, Estonians, Latvians that they couldn't even send small arms that came from Germany. Now we're not even going to sanction Gerhard Schroeder. I don't even understand what this whole thing is about. It seems to me kind of a tempest in a teapot. And you'd think we would have learned from history, the Crimean War. It's not something that is of strategic importance to us. But without going on too long for our listeners and the rest of you, one more thing that I think is very important to say, and I've been saying it for a long time. Vladimir Putin revealed 2 days ago that in a conversation with Bill Clinton in 2000, in his last year of the presidency, that Putin approached him and said, hey, what would the American people think about Russia joining NATO? Now, imagine the world today if Russia had joined NATO and we had turned our power against radical Islam and an ascendant communist China. It would be a completely different playing field, but we didn't do that. And in his speech to his own people, he said several times, why are they constantly trying to make an enemy out of me? And I think there's a lot of truth to that question, and I certainly would like to hear it answered by our leadership.
Liz, any take on what's going on there?
These are momentous times. My, hope is that we continue to look through these events through a Catholic lens. And, to my, realization and kind of surprise, I've been studying and reading a lot from Malachi Martin. Malachi Martin, the Jesuit, great novelist of Windswept House, of the Art Bell interviews. He was a Vaticanista, expert in the Vatican, spent many years there. He also had read The Secrets of Fatima and read The Third Secret. And he has talked about it and written about it. And one of the things that he said about The Third Secret, Our Lady asked for the third secret would be the events that would unfold would begin in the Ukraine and then move to Russia. And as we know, the events of Fatima, Our Lady asked that the world be consecrated by the Pope and all of the bishops to the Immaculate Heart of Mary so that the errors of Russia would not spread around the world. Many believe that that has not been done. There are a lot of geopolitical reasons, apparently, where they felt they could not consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. So here we are with Russia invading Ukraine. And for the Catholic listeners, it's important to know that Ukraine is the second largest Catholic church outside of the Catholic Roman Church, the Latin Church. And Malachi would say in his interviews, he said, Our Lady is very concerned about Ukraine. I can't quite get a handle about that. Russia, certainly I understand, but that the events would begin in Ukraine and go to Russia. I think it's very important for our listeners at this point in history, with so many momentous, troubling things happening simultaneously to our neighbors in the north and to Russia, into Ukraine, and to Europe. I think it's important for everybody to turn back to Fatima, read the messages of Fatima, Father Gruner, who understood and tried to bring the message of Fatima, the message of peace to the world, and to return to the rosary and to listen to what Our Lady is saying to the world. I mean, for me, this is becoming an urgent cry to the world, is that we should all go to Fatima.org and start gathering our families and praying the family rosary. Ukraine and Russia could devolve into yet the Third World War. We know that all sorts of momentous things are going to be happening as a result of the secrets of Fatima. Is this the time with what's happening in Ukraine and Russia? I don't know. But certainly we can mitigate these times, these dangers. And, Malachi was fond of saying, Satan is on the march. And I think after everything that's happened in the last few weeks, I think we can all say, yeah, Satan is on the march. both at the World Economic Forum, in Ukraine, in Russia, in Canada, in our own beautiful country, the United States.
Just to peel back a little bit for some of our viewers who might not know, I think there was in the church a very heavy debate over the consecration of Russia in 84 by Pope John Paul II and so on. We learned later that he was in fact pressured by his own people not to mention Russia when he wanted to. We also learned then from Cardinal Burke in 2017 on the centenary of Fatima that Russia wasn't consecrated as Our Lady wished explicitly. And so he called on the faithful to beg the Holy Father that Russia be consecrated explicitly according to Our Lady's instruction. And there's some very interesting things that can flow from that. And we know already that Sister Lucia was so very specific that it needed to be done and so forth in a very specific way. But all that aside, one of the signs that Our Lady said is that if it's not done, Russia would spread her errors. It will be used as a chastisement for the world. And then she did promise it would be done. It would be done late, she said. But it's very interesting that she says when it's done, there will be a period, Russia will convert, and there will be a period of peace given to the world. And that's one of the telltale signs that the 84 consecration didn't take in that specific way, because Our Lady's promise of peace would have been very strange indeed. Because if you look at from 84 till now, just if you look, for instance, at abortion, we've had more abortion, more killing of the innocent than at any time in world history combined, right now from 84 to now, than if you take all of history, including legal abortion before that. So that promise of peace, surely, in Our Lady's words, meant also peace in the womb. And so this can't be looked at just in a way that, oh, it's already done, no problem. Anyway, Father, I'd very much like to hear your take on it. From a priest from the clergy, having lived all in that milieu, please tell us what you think about what's going on right now, Russia, Ukraine, and perhaps how that pertains to Fatima as well.
Liz brought up Malachi Martin, and of course, the state of the Jesuits now, and the Jesuits used to call him Malarkey Martin, which is the first sign that he knew what he was talking about. And in Windswept House, if you ever get that book, there's you can go online, you can find out that the character that refers to somebody very specific in the Vatican. It's like it's a tell-all history book. And by the way, Trinity Publications in Canada has a series of his interviews that I'd recommend everybody get. There's 9 books in it. And he knew what he was talking about and helps guide us in what's going on here. The thing is, I used to be troubled about, well, what are the leaders doing? And why are they letting this kind of thing happen? Nobody can be that dumb. The demonizing of Russia. Yes, the Russian error, which we saw has spread in terms of the destruction of faith and family and radical feminism, and we see that all over the world, and certainly in the United States. But it didn't say the Russian error would stay in Russia. In fact, there seems to be signs that Russia is more Catholic than the United States, and certainly many of the other countries like Canada. Why are they still demonizing them over this little bit? Why are they so concerned about the Ukrainian border? So, for instance, in the United States, we're not so much concerned about our own border. What's going on here? Why is it nobody's fixing this problem that we all acknowledge exists? And nobody can be that dumb. So it means, watch, it's intentional. As always has been the case with sin, it's intentional. And when we're disregarding God's law, when we're disregarding what Our Lady has warned us about, there's intentionality here. And it's inside the church as well, which is why Windswept House and these other books by Malachi Martin are so important, because it's revealing the rot in the Catholic Church, which has not stood up against not just the demonization of Russia, but China, which is a far bigger player. I don't know. Why isn't the administration saying something about China? And they're all worried about Russia. Well, it's because, as we know from the scandals that develop that the media won't touch, the Bidens and everybody above him that are his puppeteers have a vested interest, a very economic interest in Ukraine and in China, not so much in Russia. I was just reading Matthew chapter 24 today, which is the signs of the times. Read the signs of the times. And as we watch what's unfolding at blistering speed before us, let us realize what Jesus said to do with the signs of the times, which was, get out of Dodge, make for the hills, don't go back into the city. What that means for us today in practical application is because we can talk and we can help people understand where the world's going, is prepare for what's coming, because it is coming, because the Catholic Church itself did not do what it was supposed to do with regard to consecrating Russia.
There is so much we could go into there, and I'm sure we're going to delve into it more. I wanted to do a little bit of a segue into the Canadian situation that involves the geopolitics as well. Take a look at this. It involves Russia and Ukraine. It was the statement of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on it. Take a look, and I'd like your reactions to it.
Canada and our allies will defend democracy. We are taking these actions today to stand against authoritarianism. The people of Ukraine, like all people, must be free to determine their own future. We will continue working with our international partners to safeguard Ukraine's territorial integrity and prevent further Russian aggression.
Mr. Hypocrisy himself, who would like to take a first shot at that?
It's so disingenuous, right? Because they are going to do nothing. They have done nothing. What was striking to me was, as a big fan of Orwell, and for 1984 to have been a book that really struck a chord with me as a young person, he sounds like the voice I expected to hear coming out of the TV inside that novel, talking about war is peace, peace is war. All people have their right to a future. War, peace, war. This is utter nonsense, and people had better wake up. We're watching the entire Western alliance be completely collapsed. If anything, it should take us back to my comment of last week. To a certain extent, from a strategic standpoint, Europe is lost. You're not going to defend the party at the frat house that's plugged into the little old lady next door. I think we need to start concentrating inside of our own hemisphere and taking care of this giant population on our border and all the way south. And as I've said many times, our adversaries cannot swim here. And this should be a wake-up call for everybody. We're watching this jawboning from London to Washington, D.C., and I think it's terrifying to have our own president and this vice president of ours beat the drum for war when they're in no way prepared to do anything about it. And their aggressive stance could make this whole situation worse. Part of the problem is we encouraged a lot of these Ukrainians to think that we were going to back them up. And so they armed up and they did things they might not have done. I'm talking about individuals, not necessarily the military, but we're going to own some of this because we were the ones screaming war, war, war. And now we're screaming good luck, good luck, good luck. And it's shameful beyond anything I have ever seen in American foreign policy.
Up there are the stepchildren of Klaus Schwab, Justin Trudeau, and Christia, as I call her, Christia No Freeland, because she certainly, with her draconian tactics as deputy prime minister, has really denied freedom to the Canadians. And along with, now we know, half of the Canadian cabinet are from the World Economic Forum. And, you know, how can you be so unself-aware that, you know, here he is talking about what he's just done to his own Canadian people, and yet saying that, you know, we're not going to tolerate totalitarianism by the Russians. It's just, it is Orwellian. We're in an alternate state, it seems to me, where one thing comes out their mouth and they do something the exact opposite. It's important for people to really start looking at what are the goals of the global elites. And that was the global elite in front, running Canada with his henchmen behind him. These are the people who have been framed in globalism. And that is precisely, it's not the goal of the Canadian people in the best interest of the Canadian people. It's the best interest of the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab and the global elite. That's what they're put in place to do. And so it's, you know, what's really good about all this, John Henry and folks, is that the light is being shined on what is going on. Who are these people? what's their agenda, and who do they owe their allegiance to? Their allegiance to is not to the people who elected them. Their allegiance to is this dark global elite who have an agenda that is to destroy Christianity and to destroy freedom and democracy.
It's an amazing thing to have just lived through the Canadian January 6th. That's what they're making it into. Even some people have compared it even to Tiananmen Square. And we didn't see the ultimate violence like that. But that's also because the Canadians, we were there day after day after day after day of that 3-week demonstration for freedom from the truckers and their supporters of hundreds of thousands of people. But you know, in all that time, it was peaceful as anything. We're Canadians after all. And it was peaceful, loving, joyful, unbelievably so. Yet when they sent in, when Trudeau announced the Old Wars Measures Act, he called it the Emergency Measures Act, and came out with the soldiers with tear gas, clubs, with pepper spray, with even an armored vehicle, and confronted these people, wasn't always, there were a number of incidences of real brutality, especially when they took the horses in and trampled upon people. The false claims of they threw a bike at the horses to injure them. No, they didn't. That was her walker, by the way. And at the same time, the Trudeau, this so-called paragon of freedom, who's vying for freedom in the Russia-Ukraine debate, is taking it upon himself to freeze the bank accounts of his own people, has the police promise to go after people, even long-term, find out who they are, and they're doxing them. It was real convenient that like a couple of days before he instituted this act to go after bank accounts of people, somehow the Give, Send, Go account for the donations to truckers is somehow hacked, and they get the information. Not only did they get the information on who they are, it's how much they donated, their comment, and not only that, there's now online for anyone and everyone to see the availability of people to go and see exactly where these folks live who donated. And we just saw horrifically a poster up in Ottawa. It says, "Know your neighbors," and it gives the location of names of the people who donated to the truckers. And you know what? The people who donated, and all of us who love freedom, we could share our addresses with ourselves because we're all peace-loving, fun-loving people of all walks of life. It was amazing that it was totally multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multi-everything. And it was so beautiful because there was a fraternity there like we've never experienced before. But the other side is very much not like that. You could come to the truckers' convoy with signs opposing the truckers and walk through there and not feel like you're going to get clubbed to death. But let me tell you, on the other end, when you go into an LGBT march or a pro-abortion march, you're not walking through there thinking, oh, I'll be fine, because the other side just isn't like that. Unbelievable. Father, what have you made of the Canadian situation and Trudeau's posturing?
It struck me, even as I'm observing all this, yes, there were hundreds of thousands who were in support of this. And these elitist people like Trudeau, who's godless, and I could use some very foul language with regard to any bishop or any priest that gives him Holy Communion, because he is the most unholy person there. But it struck me that there weren't hundreds of thousands of people marching in support of that dictator, that tyrant, that petty tyrant that is Trudeau, who's a filthy liar. The 8th commandment, shouldn't bear false witness. What's this, Justin? There weren't hundreds of thousands of people saying, no, we're in support of Trudeau and his draconian measures and his use of government power. Listen, if any reason he should be thrown out of office. Canadians, let me say this, Canadians, this is your last great chance. You either stand up against that tyrant who's taking away your freedom. You better do it now. Here's your last chance. Because if he succeeds now in crushing your fellow countrymen, who, if for no other reason, you should do it for patriotic purposes, for Canada. If you don't stand by your brothers and sisters who protested against that tyrant, if you don't do it now, you're all going to burn. You're all going to be crushed. And it's like 1 Samuel 8, I'm going to say, I told you so. Just like God told the Israelites, you get your little tyrant and he abuses you. Don't come crying to me. I told you so. This what's going on in Canada is so evil beyond measure. And it's like you were talking about Orwell. They call them what's right's wrong, what's wrong's right. They are so arrogant now. They've been bragging about this since the 50s, this new world order, and how we intend to destroy the sovereignty of nations so we can have one world government. They've been bragging about it, like Rockefeller's memoirs, since the 50s. Why do we think it's a conspiracy now? Why do we get that claim? Because they own the media, control the media, control the message. And they have controlled the message here about those truckers, calling them insurrectionists. No. They're peaceful, freedom-loving, properly protesting people. Like you said, very, very peaceful. And you wouldn't dare go into, like you said, the LGBTQ, the rainbow flag ones, the abortionists, and try and put on a pro-life thing. You wouldn't come out of there alive. We need to understand who the enemy is. And we're seeing it in that Justin Trudeau, who's the enemy of every single Canadian. And you better get that straight, Canadians.
One of the things that is going on also in Canada, I mean, this is being repeated all over the world, by the way. Same MO in the United States. Just yesterday, the truckers left from California to do a convoy also to Washington. Right away, Biden got permission from the National Guard support. He's putting up the walls around the Congress there and the White House. And he's also got 50 armored vehicles to confront, I guess, the convoy of truckers. New Zealand's playing out the same way. They're going after bank accounts, and that's something I want to take up with you. This is Chrystia Freeland, our minister here, our finance minister here, who says specifically, after being questioned by reporters, that they're not only going after the bank accounts, they're going to make that part of their emergency order permanent. Take a look at this.
In terms of the financial instruments which our government is using right now to act against these illegal blockades and illegal occupation, we reviewed very, very carefully the tools at the disposal of the federal government. And we used all the tools that we had prior to the invocation of the Emergencies Act, and we determined that we needed some additional tools. Now, some of those tools, we will be putting forward measures to put those tools permanently in place. The authorities of FinTrack, I believe, do need to be expanded to cover crowdsourcing platforms and payment platform and their payment providers. So that is something that we need to do, and we will do, and that needs to be in place permanently. Some of these other tools, like the sharing of information between law enforcement and financial services, and the requirement of financial services to be reviewing their accounts proactively, and the immunity from prosecution that we have provided to them in doing this. These are extraordinary measures that we absolutely believe are necessary in the current circumstances, that are having an impact. And let me also point out, having a peaceful impact. And the other aspect of the financial tools that I would point to as being really effective and important is being clear that insurance on trucks that participate in these illegal occupations and blockades will be suspended. So we didn't have those tools. I don't believe that those tools should be part of the toolbox of a government in ordinary times, but they are necessary in these extraordinary circumstances, and they are having a very clear impact.
Okay, reactions to that.
I don't even know what to say to that. Vipers from hell, except Canada, Canadians, you either stand up against her now. How dare she even mouth those words? Which shows you how bold they are. Yeah, well, I'm not going to use bad language, but I could. And you Canadians better wake up and realize what a vipers from hell that person is.
This is what Archbishop Vigano has underscored, is that the pandemic has allowed world governments to implement authoritarian and repressive measures against personal freedom that are essential to move forward on the one world government. And so that's what's happening in Canada. They're using the pandemic, which should be absolutely right now. All the mandates should be dropped but they are using it as a way to ramp up repressive measures to distill tyranny within the various governments of the world.
I just want your take, Jack, on it before we head off to another segment I wanted to show you as well. But the one thing that's really weird with this is that basically by doing this, aren't they concerned about creating a run on the banks in Canada? They're going after people's personal accounts. How can that not cause Canadians to go, oh my gosh, and I don't care what side you're on, if they figure, oh, our accounts aren't safe, the banks are being commissioned to go after people in their account whose accounts they hold. And remember, it was TD Bank, Toronto Dominion Bank, one of the biggest banks in Canada, that preemptively asked the government to hold the funds to turn them over to the government. So this is very, very strange. With the banks doing a proposal for digital ID and everything else going on, this is happening currently in Canada. Just your take, Jack, very quickly.
I think there's two things. Number one, I think we have to look at the behavior of the Canadian government and see it through the lens of what we know the communist government in China has been doing for years, which is trying to create this social credit system whereby you have a rating inside the social order based upon the behavior that you engage in on the streets. Now, these people are engaging in 100% legal, peaceful behavior, and they are being targeted. Their livelihoods are being targeted. They're going to take their insurance away from them, all these things. One thing I would love to ask all these Western leaders who are imposing these draconian principles on their own people, how does one protest when you've taken everything away from me? You've taken away my truck, my livelihood, my bank account. I can't travel. I can't, engage in the normal course of civil life. How does one protest at that point? I think they're playing a very dangerous game. I think it's irresponsible. And at the end of the day, you ask, what are they going to do if they take a run on the Canadian banks? Well, I'm pretty sure they'll just declare a new issue of Canadian currency. They're going to keep playing the game. They're going to keep doing it. They can't destroy the human spirit without destroying the human spirit. And we've watched over the last 25 years, the rich get richer, the Trudeaus of the world pack on money after money. The average wage middle-class family was earning, say, $45,000 a year, 95, and what is it now, 61 or 58? And the richest man in the world at that time had, maybe $10 billion, and now he's got several $100 billion, and he's not alone. He's not in a team of five anymore. I've said this for a long time. You cannot get plantation rich without slaves.
Let's take a look, and we'll conclude with this. This is a brilliant video that Elizabeth Yore pointed out to us. It's done by Eastern Freedom. God bless you guys for doing this. Let's take a look at that. I'd like to get your reactions to it.
The young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, half of this cabinet, are actually young noble leaders of the world economic forum. We penetrate the cabinets.
The change is not just happening. The change can be shaped by us. We have to prepare for a more angry world. How to prepare? Take the necessary action to create a fairer world. I see the need for a great reset.
So people assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen.
There is only one way this pandemic is going to go. It's going to get worse and worse and worse.
The next crisis is already waiting for us around the corner, and it is the climate crisis.
Eastern Freedom compilation of course, Klaus Schwab, head of the World Economic Forum, boasting about having Trudeau, many of the world leaders in his back pocket. Reactions from any of you to start to that?
As I said earlier, they've been bragging about this since the 1950s. These vile, godless, despicable people who are this top elite. They want to get to like 3% at the top, 97% at the bottom, nobody in the middle. And when you try and talk about it, oh, you're just a conspiracist. There's no conspiracy. They're bragging about it. Look at this guy. Who is this guy? Where does he live? And why is he still not criticized by all our leaders? Because they are in cahoots with this guy. And look what his agenda is. Look what his goal is. And they do it like, I remember Rahm Emanuel said, let's not let a good crisis go to waste. And so they're using these fake crises, that they're creating these crises to then ultimately control the world, destroy us, make us all slaves. And can I just say this? They can do this in Canada a lot easier than they can do it here in the United States, because Canada seems to be, if I can say it, I hope I don't offend you, John Henry, but there seems to be this pacifist, gunless, how do you defend yourself people? It's like when the Japanese wouldn't come invade us because they knew that everybody behind every bush would be able to defend themselves. What they've done is they've unarmed the people. And who's got all the armament but these government people? This is contrary to the principles of the American Revolution and our Second Amendment. Nobody else has that, and that's why they're able to do that in all these other countries. They try to pull that here in America. They're having a rude awakening because true, faithful, patriotic Americans aren't going to put up with that nonsense for much longer. But what's going on in Canada? How come they can't defend themselves? How can they go after the truckers and not have a true entire public uprising against them? And it's not, see, they're couching it in terms of uprising. It's not an uprising. It's taking back what was stolen from them by vipers such as Trudeau. These people at the top, these elitists, have stolen your entire future, Canada. Get your head on straight and do something about it. These are thieves, and these elites have forgotten that they are there to serve us, not to rule over us like the tyrants that they are. They've forgotten that, but they control the media, which they started here in America in the early 1900s. They bought a controlling interest in the top 25 newspapers, which was the only media back then. And they've only consolidated the control of the media. So you're not seeing, like you were referencing, all those protests around the world. You're not hearing about that, because if people suddenly understood they're not alone, that there are other like-minded, free-minded people they would all come together and fight against these thieves in the government. Well, then they would get a little rude awakening. These tyrants like Trudeau. You better get rid of Trudeau. Who's that woman? I don't know who she is, but get rid of her, and you better do it now.
But one thing we as Catholics have to understand: you cannot have one world government without subjugating the one world church to your will. And we've been watching this as the Catholic laity now, myself, I can say only for not as long as the rest of you, but as a historian, I've been watching it, the way that they have been undermining the traditional aspects of the Catholic teach to slowly weaken the foundation of that church built upon a rock. And we as Catholics, our first line of defense has got to be inside our church on a global basis. And secondarily, once we have that cadre, our faithful together, we can lock arms. Then I think it's important that we take that faith and we take the courage that comes along with it, and we go against the civil institutions that are suppressing our liberties as well.
Liz, last word from you.
Last word is the New World Order is neither new nor order. It is about chaos, and in chaos is when they expect to take over. Klaus Schwab is not been ever elected by anybody, but he has assumed this position where he is calling the shots, quite frankly. And one of the goals of the New World Order, of the Great Reset, is to destroy Christianity, is to destroy the family, is to destroy sovereignty, and to destroy democracy. And in order to protect and defend those precious institutions, it is required of all of us. Let's be clear, there are far more of us than there are of them. And our voice needs to be protected and needs to be articulated every day. And every Catholic, starting at this point in time, whether you're been in the church and practicing or been away from the church for years because of what's going on in the church, that you must come back. You must take up our weapon of choice that Our Lady gave us, which is the rosary, which is going to restore peace to our countries, which will restore peace to our families, Christianity to the world. But it now is the time. All of us have that sense that something momentous is going on around the world. It is spinning out of control. And Our Lady said to turn to our Lord, to Jesus Christ. She gave us the weapon of the rosary, and we need to take back our church, take back our countries, to restore faith in our families. And only then will there be peace on this earth. But this is the time, and we have to seize it. And the Catholic laity are the only ones who are going to restore this world to peace.
What a whirlwind. It is such an honor for me to be with you discussing these momentous times. And I think for all of our viewers, it's going to be an amazing thing to see faith and reason at play with this show. May God bless you all, and thank you. And we'll see you the next week, every week here at Faith and Reason on LifeSite News.